So bali po, nagtapos daw po tayo last meeting discussing yung activity natin, yung Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia. So for today, we'll be discussing specific issues in STS. Specifically po, ang i-discuss natin ay genetic modification, some examples of genetically modified organism, tapos included na rin po may kaunti tungkol sa biodiversity at saka global climate change. Yun po yung content ng PPT na yun. And di ba sinend ko na rin po yung YouTube link, I don't know kung tinignan nyo, pero po kung balak nyo balikan or aralin at ulit-ulitin, nandun naman po yung na yun, yung discussion ng PPT na yun. But anyway, i-discuss pa rin naman natin po na kung meron mga ilang hindi naintindihan ngayon, pwede nyo na lang balikan dun sa na yun, sa sinasabi ko pong date na sinend ko naman na. Tapos, kanina may binabanggit din ako sa 3.2 na gusto kong isuggest regarding the report, yung group activity report na binigay ko po sa inyo on nanotech at saka global pandemic. Meron na po ba tayong kasi wala pa naman kayong sinesend sa GC, parehas po ang 3.2 tsaka 3.3. Meron na po ba tayong groupings at meron na po bang may mga assignment na po ba? May mga representatives na para sa bawat grupo?
Sa 3.3 ma meron po. Nasend ko na rin po yun sa GC.
Sa 3, nandito na si Pres. Sa 3.3 meron na.
Meron na po.
Tapos, nag-start na po ba? Or hindi pa naman? I mean, nag-start na with research and doing the PPT?
Yung sa grupo namin, hindi pa.
Ay, hindi pa po. How about sa 3.2 po?
Yes po, ma'am, may groupings na rin po kami.
Nag-start na rin po ba tayo ng paggawa?
As of now po, ma'am, nagkaroon pa lang po ng volunteerism kung sino po yung mga magpe-present at maggagawa po ng PPT.
Okay. Hindi, kasi naisip ko lang po na kung baka gusto niyo lang din, since di ba, laging minimix ko naman po yung klase ng 3.2 tsaka 3.3 is kung halimbawa sa nanotech, yung unang topic natin ay yung first part nung nanotech, like from history to kung gagamitin natin yung kung magiging reference niyo po or guiding module natin. If I'm not mistaken, yung flow doon ng topic is from history to nano manufacturing or nanofabrication. Tapos, mga examples na ng mga nanomaterials, yung mga benefits including. Tapos, consequences or potential risk of nanotech. So, pwede kayang hatiin natin. Diba? Halimbawa, 3.2, magdi-discuss dun sa first part. Halimbawa, from history to nanofabrication hanggang benefits. Tapos, yung 3.3 naman sa possible risk o tsaka siguro status na lang ng nanotechnology in the Philippines, pwedeng ganon. Tapos same with the second topic, yung global pandemic, yung hatiin din. Medyo mahaba din yun kasi based din sa module, din siya parang tinis din yung history, yung iba't ibang mga epidemics and pandemics na nangyari sa mundo. So, what do you think?
I think that would be better po, ma'am. I think that would be better po to conserve time din po.
How about for press sa 3.3? Tingin mo?
Yes, ma'am.
Or na-distribute na po ba yung mga topic?
Yung sa global pandemic po, di pa po. Yung sa nanotech, nagtatanong po ako sa ibang group, pero di pa naman po yung sa amin. Pero okay lang naman din po na makapag-coordinate lang.
Tingin ko lang, kasi same pa rin naman, may di-discuss po natin lahat ng topic. Naisip ko lang kasi medyo, nag-discuss na kasi kami sa ibang klase namin nung nakaraan. Medyo kumain siya ng medyo mahaba-habang oras. Kasi bukod dun sa topic, may konting pag-game yung yung parang yung way of presentation nila. Parang in between may mga icebreaker. So, inabot kami ng parang more than 2 hours po yata. Nanotech pa lang. Tapos yung isang topic pa na mas mahaba din. So, kaya naisip ko na what if, kasi kung mangyayari, 4:30 to 6, discussion nanotech, tapos same 6 to 7:30, gano'n na naman. So naisip ko na what if gano'n na lang po para, ayun nga, parehas lang naman, mabibigyan ko po ng grades, parehas 3-3 and 3-2, and may di-discuss din naman natin within that time frame na usually po ginagawa natin, na merge yung klase ng 3-3 at saka 3-2. Kung okay lang po sa lahat. Naisip ko lang yun. Kung gusto nyo lang. Kung ayaw nyo naman ng ganun, okay lang din naman. Walang problema.
Ma'am?
Yes po.
May suggestion rin po sana yung section po namin, yung 3-2 po, kung okay lang rin po sa kabilang section na, just like for example po, sa amin po na lang yung buong nanotech, tapos sa kanila po kunwari yung...
Wait lang. Naisip ko din yon na sabi ko, what if kaya, kaya lang, mas gusto ko pa rin na may, alam mo yon yung parang, research din nila yung sa topic na ito. Tapos same with your section na merong magre-research pa rin about global pandemic, meron pa rin magre-research about nanotech. Gets mo? Yung parang naisip ko na rin yun what if yung isang topic na lang dito sa grupo na sa section na to and then yung isa dito. Pero parang mas gusto ko yung yung gano'n, yung maghahati. So check nyo yung yung module natin, pero yung sa alam ko yung sa nanotech ganun yung sequence nung topic doon. So check nyo yung sa global pandemic. Okay? So parang mas gusto ko po yung ganun, na ganun ang hatian. Kung susundin nyo yung sinasabi ko po, na kung sino man yung halimbawa sa 3-2 na naka-assign na grupo para sa nanotech is po siya. Halimbawa, tansyahin nyo na 50-50 naman yung hatian. Huwag naman yung sobrang madami doon sa isang section at sobrang konti naman sa isa. Para balance din po siya. Okay? So, ayun Joshua mas gusto ko po yung yung sinasabi ko kaysa doon sa kanya-kanyang topic na bawat section.
Okay po ma'am, no problem po.
Okay. Ayun. For 3-3, okay naman?
Okay naman.
Para po by next meeting, So para by next meeting, kinikwento ko sa yung natin So by next meeting ay pwede na tayo siguro mag-start with nanotech. So, anong petsa na yun? Wait lang. Tapos, So, July 6, nanotech tayo. Tapos July 13, global pandemics tayo. Tapos, pwede pong, kung alanganin tayo, 13 Wednesday, tapos Saturday ay exam, pwede naman natin gawing 20 na yung posting ng exam. At least exam na lang yun. So, diba? Tama ba? Okay po ba tayo sa schedule na gano'n? 6 and 13, last two topics natin, tapos 20, posting of the exam. That's Wednesday. Diba? So I think okay naman po, yung schedule na iyon. Okay? Sige. I-inform na lang po ako kung paano yung naging hatian natin, both 3-3 and 3-2. Okay? Attendance tayo. Okay, 3-2 muna. Attendance, Acosta, Audrey, 3-2. Acosta, wala. Aquino, John, Patrick.
Andito po.
Okay, Arca, Giovanni.
Present po, ma'am.
Armo Halias, Daniel. Wala po siya. Ballesteros, Mariel.
Present po.
Bantugan, Steven.
Present po.
Outro, Lorien.
Present po.
Bia, Egeline.
Present po, ma'am.
Cardenas, Angelica. Wala. Crespo, Joshua.
Present po.
De Vera, Mark.
Present po, ma.
De Los Reyes, Ivan.
Present po.
Ivan. Dionela, Marinela.
Present po.
Dones, Nicole.
Present po.
Spiritu, Armando.
Present po, ma'am.
Estrada, Mary Christine.
Present po.
Torres, Patrick.
Present po, ma'am.
Gutierrez, Angelica. Angelica Gutierrez. Hernandez, Ranela.
Present po.
Amorabon, Ace.
Present po.
Kozay, Michael. Lopez, Sofia.
Present po.
Magno, Jessica.
Present po.
Rosario, Emerson. Emerson, Rosario. Sida, Christopher. Sunga, Angelo. Angelo?
Present po.
Present. Anglao, Sean. Sean? Wala. Taiko, Georgie.
Present po.
Trinidad, Mary Angeli.
Present po,
Urbano Ann.
Present po.
Yabut Ervin.
Present, ma'am.
And Zonyo Krishna. Wala. Okay. Absent po ng 3-2, Acosta, Armojalias, Gutierrez, Cosay Rosario, Sida Tanglao, and Zonyo. 3-3. Abuan, Mark.
Present po, ma'am.
Ot, Gon, Vincent. Gon Vincent. Wala po. Basurdo, Clark.
Present po, ma'am.
Mahar, Denzel. Denzel. Baluyot, Janina.
Present po, ma'am.
Basco, Kale. Russell.
Present po, ma'am.
Batong, Justin.
Present po.
Cabradilla, Lito.
Present po.
Lito. Paleha, Jessica. Canindo, Remy. Victoria.
Present po.
Celis, Proceso.
Present po.
Sid, Amphimary.
Present po.
Kopian, Marvin.
Present po.
Endona, Micaela.
Present po.
Espinola, April.
Present po.
Evangelista, Eljan. Evangelista, wala nga. Catalvero, Dance.
Present po.
Daton, Marilu.
Present po.
Javier, Lexan.
Present po.
Rosa, Francisco. La Rosa, wala po. Mercado, Charmaine.
Present po.
Ostasa, Jim. Nagrampa, Andrea.
Present po.
Nieva, Carl.
Present po.
Oferina, Rodolfo.
Present po.
Oteiza, Jessa. Oteiza, wala. Alapus, Princess.
Present po, ma'am.
Pancho.
Present po.
Sino po yung huling nag-present? Pancho po ba yun?
Palapos po present.
Alapus, present. Pancho? Wala. Okay. Pelagyaw, Nicole.
Present po.
Perez, Jana.
Present po.
Po, Janelle.
Present po.
Pedra, Angel.
Present po.
Sibug, Mark.
Present po, ma'am.
Erickson.
Present po.
Silvestre, Sugar.
Present po.
T. Jade.
Present po.
Taoy, Shamir. Shamir? Absent?
Ma'am, si Sham
And
po ata nasa...
Tohay, Mariah.
Ma'am, si Sham po ata may performance po ata yung PUP Unique Serenata. Ngayon po.
Okay. So, wala nga siya. Okay, sige po. Victohay, Mariah.
Present po, ma'am.
Okay. So, yun. Absent 33, Ancot, Bahar, Kaleha, Evangelista, La Rosa, Mostasa, Otesa, Pancho, and Taoy. Shamir.
Ma'am,
present.
Ma'am, nandito na po ako, ma'am.
Otesa. Sino pa
Ma'am,
po?
Present po Gutierrez. Hindi po ma-open mic ko kanina.
Gutierrez? Parang wala akong nabanggit na Gutierrez. Sorry.
Taoy
Pinanggit
po.
ko ba?
Dito na po.
Wait lang. Gutierrez, anong 3-2 ka? Tama po ba?
Opo, 3-2 po.
Yun, 3-2. Sino po yun? Sino binanggit mo?
Zonyo po, 3-2.
Audio. 3-2, okay. Who else? That's it? Okay, sige.
Ma'am, Taoy po, nandito na po.
Tao yan, dito na. Okay. Okay, sige. Okay? So, pag-usapan nyo na lang po, ha? Suggest ko po kanina. Okay? Tapos, inform na lang po ako. Basta by next meeting, by next Wednesday, ang topic po natin is nanotech. Okay? Sige. Let's start. Okay, so our topic for today's meeting is about genetic modification or genetically modified organism. So ito yung unang topic natin for today. So what is this GMO? Genetically modified organism is an organism, either a plant, an animal, or microorganism, in which the genetic material, known as the DNA, or DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, has been altered in a way that doesn't occur naturally via mating or natural recombination. So that's according to WHO in 2014. So it's an organism whose genome has been engineered in the laboratory in order to favor the expression of desired physiological traits or the production of desired biological products. So in genetic modification, the genome, the gene of an organism is artificially manipulated to be able to create an organism with desirable traits or desirable biological products. So genetic modification creates combination of plants, animals, or even microorganisms, just like bacteria and even virus, that do not occur in nature or through traditional crossbreeding method or selective breeding. So, yun yung purpose ng genetic modification. So, genetic engineering, also known as genetic modification, is the direct manipulation of the organism's genome using biotechnology. So, by the way, genome po is the organism's complete set of DNA or genetic material of an organism. So, in genetic modification, however, recombinant genetic technologies are employed to produce organisms whose genomes have been precisely altered or modified at the molecular level, usually by the inclusion of their genes from unrelated species of organisms that code for the traits that would not be obtained easily through conventional selective breeding. So this image shows a simple process or way of genetic modification. How to create a GMO, a genetically modified organism. Dito po ang ginamit na donor is the bacterium. So makikita natin dito, explain ko naman to dun sa dun sa lecture video, na yung nasa kaliwa po ay isang klase ng prokaryotic organism, which is a bacteria or bacterium. Tapos yung nasa kanan po ay eukaryotic organism. Okay, bakit nasabi na prokaryote at eukaryote yung isa? Because isa sa unique characteristic ng mga bacteria o ng mga prokaryotic organism is, aside from their main chromosome or DNA, meron silang tinatawag na plasmid, yung bilog na blue na yan. So yung plasmid na yon is an extra chromosomal DNA which is only present among prokaryotes and not in a eukaryotic organism or not in a eukaryotic cell. Kaya obvious naman dun sa kanan na cell ay walang plasmid, so eukaryotic cell yon. Cell from another organism, from a eukaryotic organism, either a plant, an animal, basta po hindi siya prokaryote or hindi siya bacteria. So it's not bacteria. So it's a bacteria and maaring plant, maaring animal, or other eukaryotic organism. So in this case, yung plasmid nga po, yung extra chromosomal DNA na yan, ang kinuha, at doon po in-insert yung gene of interest na kinuha naman from the second organism. So when you say gene of interest, ibig sabihin, nandito sa gene na to, encoded yung mga traits na o yung desirable traits na gusto mong ma-express o mag-manifest doon sa organism later on. Kaya sinasabing gene of interest. So maaaring magandang mata, puting balat, o kung ano man. So gene of interest. And then recombinant DNA. So after po nun, yung bacterium na yon with the recombinant DNA or the recombinant plasmid is inserted into a new organism in which, or a eukaryotic organism in which magpo-produce na po yun continuously, at ito na yung tinatawag natin na genetically modified. So genetically modified because obviously initially po ay wala siyang gene from another organism, but this case meron na po. So it is inserted into a new organism. So si number 4, siya na yung GMO natin. Ayan. So yung mga sumunod, these are just examples of genetically modified organism in food and agricultural industries. And of course, dito po ini-explain na din yung mga benefits o yung mga advantage of using GMO or genetic modification. So like for instance, very common naman po ito, kasi kahit dito sa atin po matagal nang marami tayong mga farmers na nagtatanim na o gumagamit ng genetically modified na corn o yung tinatawag po natin na BT corn. BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. Okay, actually hindi lang corn marami pa, may BT eggplant. Okay, so matagal na rin naman. So BT corn, yung nasa kaliwa is the genetically modified corn, tapos yung nasa kanan is obviously yung hindi. So non-BT corn. So anong purpose? Why the corn is genetically modified? For pest resistance. Kasi po etong corn, ang kanyang nagiging problem kasi is may pest, yung kalaban niya itong yung corn borer na tinatawag. So ayan, so BT corn, clone the BT toxin gene then inserted into the corn genome. Ayan, so yung Bacillus thuringiensis ko, it's a kind of bacterium found usually in the soil which produces an insecticidal protein known as the delta endotoxin. So the delta endotoxin, it's a kind of protein which is poisonous to some insect pest, kasama na po yung corn borer. So, if it is inserted into the gene of the corn, ibig sabihin, once kinain siya katulad na nakikita niyo sa picture, once kinain siya ng corn borer, madidead siya. Since toxic sa kanya or poisonous po sa kanya, yung protein na yun, which is inserted into the gene of the corn or the BT corn. So, in that way, yung mga farmers natin, meron ako mga nabasa na okay naman, since matagal na nga po din siyang ginagawa, not only in the Philippines, mas lalo na sa iba pang lugar. So, halos lahat naman ng nabasa ko is maganda yung feedback. Ibig sabihin, yung mga farmers natin mas okay sa kanila. Mas napapabilis yung production ng corn. At the same time, hindi na nila kailangang mag-isip na yung tipong matutulog ka ngayon, kinabukasan, napeste na yung mga pananim mo. So in this case, ay wala talagang kumbaga walang nagiging problem with this kind of insect pest with the corn borer. So, isa yun sa nagiging benefit or advantage of genetic modification for pest resistance. Another is virus resistance. So, almost same dun sa discussion kanina about the BT corn. This time naman, ang example po dito is the papaya ring spot virus. Ayun. So, yung papaya kasi is ginawa po siyang genetically modified with the genome coming from the virus itself. So, ang problem po kasi dito, ayan, yung picture dun sa kanan, yan, ganyan yung itsura nung papaya which is infected by the virus. So, una daw yun na nakita in 1992 pa in Hawaii, and naging problem yun ng Hawaii kasi nga, kumbaga, isa sa, ano tawag dyan, yung parang pinuproduce nila, na food or product is papaya. So given na may ganitong ang problema sa mga pananim nila, lalo-lalo na ang bilis kasi ng transmission since virus po ito, tapos yung carrier niya or yung vector niya ay mga aphids. So yung mga aphids po yung nagdadala, nagtatransmit from one papaya tree to another papaya tree. So ang bilis ng transmission. So kaya talagang naging problem yun sa Hawaii. So it was very destructive. And once kasi, once a papaya plant, papaya plant is infected, it can never recover. So, hindi na siya makakain. So, given that problem, so what they did is to insert the gene coming from the papaya ring spot virus itself. So, yung tawag po dun sa gene na yun is PRSV-HA gene, or PRSV hemagglutinin gene. So, it's a kind of protein. Plus, yung mga pangalan po, nandun yun sa video, check yun na lang ulit para mabilis lang po tayo. So, nandun yun, okay? Balikan nyo na lang po, in-emphasize ko po yun dun sa video. If I'm not mistaken, may itinype ko pa yata yung mga pangalan. So, para po alam na natin yung mga spelling and all. So, anyway, so yung PRSV hemagglutinin gene, it's a kind of protein, it's a kind of surface protein found in the virus. Again, it is inserted into the papaya. Okay? So, kaya po, kahit kainin siya ng nitong mga, or infected ba siya nitong mga virus na to, is immune na siya. So, virus resistance, that's the second benefit or advantage of having genetic modification. Saglit lang. Okay, so next po ay next is herbicide resistance. So the example given naman po dito is the soybean, yung Roundup Ready soybean, which is genetically engineered or genetically modified soybean kung saan yung kanilang DNA is altered to allow them to withstand the herbicide na tinatawag na glyphosate. So glyphosate yung herbicide na ginagamit used to kill the weeds. So dati, pag mini-spray yan, ang tendencies na dadamay yung mga yung soybean o iba pang halaman, which is not naman intended na patayin. Kaya lang, hindi naman pwedeng hindi mag-spray kasi yung mga weeds na yan ay nagiging competitor ng halaman. So, having it genetically modified, ibig sabihin the farmers can spray herbicide killing the weeds but not the soybeans. So, ayun. So, yung soybean ay glyphosate tolerant. Soybean na siya. Okay? And then, another is fortification. That's another benefit of genetic modification for fortification. So, like sa Philippines, isa po tayo, if I'm not mistaken, kung una ba tayo or basta isa tayo sa mga nauna nito na nag-approve ng paggamit ng nitong golden rice na ito, pagpo-produce ng golden rice as an example of genetically modified na plant fortified with some minerals or certain minerals like beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is a precursor of vitamin A. So it is introduced into the rice grain, making the rice grains fortified with vitamin A. So golden rice is genetically modified. Ayan, genetically modified golden rice to help fight vitamin A deficiency. In the Philippines, in-approve daw po iyon para kumbaga to address the issue about malnutrition and vitamin A deficiency. Okay? So, the next is cosmetic preservation. Another purpose of or benefit of genetic modification is for cosmetic preservation, especially in case of mga fruits. Kasi, like for example, ito pong apple na to, itong Arctic apple. So, through genetic engineering, especially yung tinatawag na gene slicing. Gene slicing is reducing the expression of a certain gene that contains the trait responsible for the expression of polyphenol oxidase. Polyphenol oxidase class is the chemical responsible for the browning of apple. So, siya yung responsable para po kaya mabilis magbago yung kulay nung prutas, especially the apple, the Arctic apple. So, through gene slicing or genetic modification, it reduces the expression of that polyphenol oxidase. Therefore, madadelay din yung onset ng pagbabago ng kulay. So, in that case, nape-preserve yung kulay, So, hindi pa rin pangit tingnan. Okay? Tapos, another is, yung increased growth rate, another benefit of genetic modification. The example given is the advantage salmon. So, salmon. So, in this case, yung gene from an ocean pout, okay? Yung ocean pout po is an eel-like fish. The gene from this ocean pout is introduced to salmon, the genetically modified salmon, making the salmon grow faster than the normal rate ng paglaki ng mga salmon. Kasi si ocean pout ay isang klase ng isda which nagko-contain siya ng gene na can tolerate extremely cold water na hindi kayang gawin ng salmon. So given it, ibig sabihin, kapag ginawang genetically modified yung salmon, nung gene na yon coming from the ocean pout, it will allow the salmon to grow all year round. Kaya mas lumalaki siya. Okay, kumpara dun sa typical na salmon. So, that's it. So those are the examples of genetically modified food or products. Now, in non-food naman, crops and microorganisms, ayan. So, una pong example dito is the blue rose, and the purpose is for flower production. So, usually, genetically modified organisms in flower production can be seen either in a modified color, katulad po ditong example dito, na they wanted to produce a blue rose. Kasi by nature, wala tayo na blue rose. So, may ibang kulay, pero not blue. Okay? So, and they wanted to produce that kind of color among roses. So, kaya ang ginawa nila is to make it genetically modified. So either baguhin yung kulay, makapag-produce ng bagong kulay, or extending the base life ng mga flowers. So yun yung usual purpose of genetic modification in plants or specifically in flowers. In this case, yung ginawa nila is the rose is genetically modified to synthesize delphinidine. Okay, delphinidine is a pigment which is found in most blue flower. So yung mga blue flower po ay nagpo-produce daw po ng ganong pigment which is not produced or not seen sa mga flower na walang ganong kulay or variant. So what they did is to get that pigment from a blue flower and then genetically modified it with the white rose. Okay, white rose po yung ginawa nila dyan or ginamit nila para makapag-produce ng blue rose. Though, I don't know if you're pwede natin i-consider this pero usually ito yung example kung successful ba siya kasi hindi siya mukhang blue. Okay, although yung purpose nila is makapag-produce ng blue rose pero it appears to be bang kulay yan? Purple than blue. Okay, pero at least nagkaroon pa rin ng na-modify pa rin po yung kulay ng rose. Okay, then another is for paper production. So an example of genetically modified is poplar trees or the young poplar trees. So yun po usually yung ginagamit nila at doon nila ini-insert yung gene, yung genome that will code for ferulic acid sa young poplar trees. So what they did is to insert the gene that will code for ferulic acid. Ang ferulic acid kasi once it is inserted into the genome of the young poplar trees, it will create a weak point in the chemical structure of lignin. Okay? Which is very important kasi yung lignin na yan is kailangang tanggalin dun sa puno para makagawa ng papel. So sinasabi na parang maproseso, matrabaho, magastos, yung pagtatanggal ng lignin na yon from trees or especially dito sa poplar trees. So kaya po ang nakita nilang solusyon is to make this genetically modified. So again, by inserting the genes that will code for ferulic acid. So once the ferulic acid is inserted into the genes of the young poplar trees, the trees incorporated the acid to lignin, creating weak points in the chemical structure, and ang tendency mas mabilis parang sisirain niya yung chemical structure ng lignin. So mas mabilis siyang matatanggal sa puno while still maintaining the potential growth and strength of the tree. So sinasabi naman based on studies and hindi naman naapektuhan yung growth ng poplar trees. Then next, pharmaceutical production. The example given is the periwinkle plant. So it's modified plant to produce pharmaceutical products. So the bacterial genes were added to periwinkle plant to enhance the production of vinblastine. So this is, di ba sabi ko kanina dun sa introduction ng topic na genetic modification creates combinations of organism. It creates bacteria to bacteria, plant to plant, bacteria to plant, animal to bacteria to animal, and so on. So may mga ganong combination. So in this case, it's bacteria to a plant, to a periwinkle plant. So certain bacterial genes is added to a periwinkle plant to enhance the production of vinblastine. Vinblastine class is a substance usually added to some drugs or medications for cancer treatment. Then bioremediation is another purpose or benefit of genetic modification. Example given is shrub tobacco. Bioremediation is basically pagtatanggal ng mga pollutants sa lupa. So ang ginawa nilang solusyon is pagtatanim nga po nitong mga shrub tobacco na ito. So, the use of these modified plants to assist the bioremediation sa mga polluted land or polluted sites. So, nakita nila na by the way, the shrub tobacco is genetically modified with phytokeratin, which is used for bioremediation. It can absorb pollutants like mga zinc, cadmium, nickel, yung mga ganun. Okay, so it shows na nung based dun sa pagtatanim nila, sa studies nila, it shows that this shrub tobacco absorbs high level accumulation of those pollutants. So, yung binanggit ko kanina, like zinc, lead, cadmium, nickel, yung mga ganun. And then, next is for enzyme and drug production. So, the use of modified microorganisms, especially bacteria, which can produce enzymes for food processing and for production of medicines, producing medicines. So, the example is the thermoanaerobacter. Tapos yung enzyme is yung CGTase or the cyclomaltodextrin glycosyltransferase, so which is used as a food flavor enhancer, and it is produced by Bacterium bacillus, which was genetically modified with the gene of another bacteria, yung tinatawag na thermophilic anaerobe or thermoanaerobacter, which carries the enzyme na tinatawag nga pong CGTase or cyclomaltodextrin glycosyltransferase. So ito naman is basically through combinations of microorganisms, bacteria to bacteria. Then I guess common naman to sa atin, aware po tayo dito, yung humulin, 'di ba? Yung it is a genetically engineered insulin used to treat yung mga type 1 diabetes. Type 1 lang, kasi medyo mas madali-daling i-treat yun eh. Kasi when you say type 1 diabetes, ito yung, ang may problema dyan is, yung pancreas nila. Di ba pancreas yung organ na responsible for naturally producing insulin. So, with type 1, yun yung problema nila eh. Yung pancreas itself doesn't produce enough amount of insulin. So, medyo mas madali-dali kasi yun na gamutin. Kumpara with, turukan mo lang yan ng artificial insulin, okay na. So, unlike with type 2 na, okay yung pancreas, but the problem is yung mga target organs of your body that doesn't respond or receive. May nakabukas po na mic. Okay, so that doesn't respond doon po sa hormone like the insulin na pinuproduce ng pancreas. So ito specifically this genetically modified na insulin is only used to treat type 1 diabetes. So it can be used to treat diseases, especially nga po type 1 diabetes. So in 1996, modified human insulin was approved at tinawag po yun na Humalog. Okay, so Humalog, which is mas mas okay na po siya kumpara dun sa initial na ginamit nila. Kasi nung initial na ginamit nila is coming from parang I forgot kung anong klase ng hayop yung pinagkunan nila. So, nung in-insert yun sa tao, nagkaroon ng mga allergic reactions. So, it wasn't good, kasi nga po nagkaroon ng mga allergic reactions or negative response dun sa body nung recipient. So, what they did is to again modify it at kumbaga, from bacteria to recombinant bacteria which is inserted into human insulin gene. So, kumbaga na-lessen na yung mga yung mga allergic reactions. Kasi isa naman yun sa consequences o yung mga potential risk na tinatawag pagdating sa genetic modification, lalo na if it is inserted into humans. So, next are the benefits of GMO. Halos din na po yung mga binanggit ko na kanina. So, like for instance, higher efficiency in farming, mas mabilis yung production ng mga products nila, increase in harvest, improvement of the desirable traits or characteristics, since yun yung isa sa mga purposes po ng genetic modification na to express or to manifest those desirable traits only. Okay? Nutritional and pharmaceutical enhancement, and to reduce the use of some fertilizers and pesticides. Now, what are the potential risks of GMO? Okay? Promotes mutation. So, yan palagi yung issue pagdating sa genetic modification because you're dealing with DNA. You're dealing with the genome of an organism. So, pag pinakaalaman mo yan, may chances hindi mawawala po na there could be a mutation in the organism. When you say mutation, there could be a change in the DNA sequence of the organism. So either due to a mistake when the DNA is being copied or as a result of some environmental factors like UV. Diba? Tinitingnan yun isang factor for mutation. Tapos, human consumption of GMOs might have the following effects like allergic reactions or gene mutation, antibiotic resistance, and the nutritional value is also changed. So yung iba kasing GMO food may have change in their nutritional value. Tapos yung risk in gene flow, ang ibig sabihin po nitong risk in gene flow is the transfer of the absorbed modified genes to the other organisms. Diba? May isang genetically modified plant tapos na-dead siya. Tapos na-absorb ng lupa. Tapos nagtanim ka ng isang plant na hindi genetically modified. Pero na-absorb niya yun. So there will be a transfer. There could be a transfer of modified genes from the genetically modified plant papunta dun sa plant na hindi ng GMO. So, emergence of new forms of resistance and secondary pest and weed problems. Since maring immune na sila dun sa isa, baka magkaroon ng mag-evolve ng iba. So, recombination of virus and bacteria to produce new pathogen o yung mga disease-causing type of microorganism. The possibility of unexpected behavior of the GMOs in the environment if it escapes its intended use and may pose threat or become pest. And then Human Genome Project. Yan. So, isa rin po yan sa tinitingnan na yung Human Genome Project is maganda yung maganda yung goal niya, objective niya. By the way, Human Genome Project is mapping the human genes to provide framework for research and studies. Di ba maganda? Maganda naman talaga yung purpose po niyan eh. So, but the problem is, maaring good side para dun sa mga tao na under ng project na ito, pero maaring mag-post ng threat para sa ibang tao. Okay? So, yun yung tinitingnan nila doon. Ano pa ba? Cloning. Ayan, siya pang yan. Siyempre, kumbaga with cloning, yung ethical issue, di ba? Man playing God. So that could be another potential threat for genetic modification. Next is biosafety. So may mga nagre-regulate naman daw po ng genetic modification ng mga GMO. So una na is the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is an intergovernmental body which develops the Codex Alimentarius, known as the International Food Code, responsible for the development of standards, codes of practices, guidelines, and recommendations on food safety. So it was created by Food and Agricultural Organization together with WHO, which include pre-market assessment of the genetically modified food products and evaluation of its effect. Evaluation of the direct and indirect effects of these genetically modified products. Tapos yung pangalawa is the Cartogena Protocol on Biosafety, which is an international environmental treaty that regulates the transboundary movements of living modified organisms. So it was established in 2003 daw po, requiring the exporters to seek consent from the importers before its first shipment of living modified organisms. And then yung pangatlo is the International Trade Agreement on Labeling Food and Food Products. It's an agreement requiring the exporters to label the genetically modified food and give rights to importing parties to reject or to accept the GM product. So, I think ginagawa naman to, di ba? May mga napapansin ba kayo na, na may nabibili ba kayo mga items na naka-indicate whether the food or the product is genetically modified or hindi. Since nga po, meron tayong mga nagbabantay po dyan, nag-monitor whether sa packaging, sa manufacturing po ay naka-indicate whether GM, genetically modified product po yan or hindi. Because as consumer, we have this right to know whether yung i-consume po natin is genetically modified or hindi. Okay, so I think that's it for genetic modification. Okay, so again, yung mga binanggit ko po na na binanggit ko pong mga terms na kung hindi man po sa atin familiar, kung hindi familiar sa atin, hindi familiar in spelling and all, you may check again po dun sa you may review na lang dun sa lecture video. So yun. So after po nito, another specific issue in STS is about biodiversity. So what is this term? Biodiversity is a vast variety of life forms in the entire Earth. It encompasses all kinds of life form from single-cell organism, just like the bacteria, to the largest multicellular organism, katulad po natin. So, biological diversity is the variability among living organisms from all sources, including terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystem, and the ecological complexes of which they are part. So this includes the diversity within species, the between species, and of ecosystem. So yung naka-highlight po na yan, yun po yung tatlong klase ng biodiversity. Meron tayong tinatawag na species diversity, meron tayong tinatawag na genetic diversity, and ecosystem diversity. O ano yun? Okay. So, ito po yun. So, genetic diversity is all the different genes contained in all individual plants, animals, fungi, and other microorganisms. It occurs within a species as well as between species. So, genetic diversity is, or it refers to the total number of genetic characteristics in the genetic makeup of a certain species. So, ayan. So, pangalawa is species diversity is all the differences within and between population of species as well as between different species. So, species diversity refers to the number of species and abundance of each species that lives in a particular area or in a particular location. Like for instance, kung ilang species, 4 or 5 different species of trees in a certain forest, or 100 different species of fish in a certain pond or in a certain lake, mga ganun. Tapos yung ecosystem diversity naman is all the different habitat, biological communities and ecological processes, as well as variation within individual ecosystem. So meron tayong mga terrestrial, di ba? Ecosystem. Sa terrestrial ecosystem pa lang, marami ng variation yan. Diba? We have forest, we have tundra, we have desert, we have grassland, chaparral, diba? Tapos sa aquatic, madami din. We have freshwater, just like the lenticlotic, the rivers and streams, the lakes and ponds. Ganun din sa ocean, ganun din sa mga estuary, estuarine system. So, ganun po yun. Ayan. So, this is an image just to show how these 3 types of biodiversity are different. So, dun pa lang po sa picture, I guess gets na, how are they different, di ba? Sa genetic diversity, di ba, yung picture dyan, lahat palaka. But of course, magkakaibang palaka sila. Okay? With ecosystem diversity, again, meron tayong mga terrestrial, many terrestrial and many aquatic ecosystem. And of course, for species diversity, variety of species in a given area. So, balikan ko lang terms to remember. So, these are some of the terms that you have to remember in discussing this topic. From a gene. Gene is a unit of inherited material. Kanina ko pa yan nababanggit dun sa unang topic pa lang po natin. So the organism's collection of genes determines what it is, what it looks like, and often how it behaves. So basically, it is about the traits and characteristics of organism, which is an individual living thing. Okay. Tapos yung species, it's a group of populations of similar organisms that reproduce among themselves, but do not naturally reproduce with any other kinds of organisms. And then population is a group of individuals or organisms belonging to same species, same kind, living in a particular area. Community is a group of population that interacts with one another. Diba? Within a community, there could be a population of insects, a population of plants, a population of animals that interacts with one another. Ecosystem, a group of communities that interacts with one another and with the physical environment. Kasi when you say ecosystem, ang pinag-uusapan na po dyan, it's not only it's not only about the interaction of living things, di ba? Remember the terms biotic, pag sinabing ecosystem, biotic, abiotic, yung mga ganon. So it's not only about the biotic components, how the living things interact with one another, but how this living things is affected or influenced by abiotic components, meaning by the environment. Like for instance, how an organism is affected by change in temperature, how a plant is affected, how the growth of the plant is affected by the length of daylight and darkness, so yung mga ganon. And then biodiversity is, again, the range of variation found among microorganisms, plants, fungi, and animals. So richness, species of living organisms. What are the threats to biodiversity? Habitat loss and destruction. Siyempre po, by the way, this threats to biodiversity is identified by UN Environment Program. So, in-identify nila itong mga possible threats na to our biodiversity. So, habitat loss and destruction, isa po yan. Bukod pa siyempre sa mga limited na resources, inadequate. So, pangalawa is alteration in the ecosystem composition, meaning there is an alteration and sudden change either within species, groups, or within the environment. Pangatlo is overexploitation. Pangapat is pollution and contamination. And panglima is the global climate change. So, pangmalawakan So, lahat po itong mga diniscuss nila or in-identify nila na threats to biodiversity would lead to extinction. It would lead to the death of the species. Kaya naman, isa sa mga nakitang solusyon is to address the issue is to celebrate the life of these different organisms. So, every March 3, World's Wildlife Day po yun, celebrated every March 3. It's an opportunity to celebrate many of the beautiful and varied forms of plants and animals, of flora and fauna, and also to raise awareness of the benefits na maaring makuha natin if we conserve our environment, if we protect all these organisms or variation of organisms in the environment. So, yeah. Sustaining all life on Earth. So, by the way, ito pong World's Wildlife Day, it was proclaimed by UN General Assembly, December 20, 2013. 68th session, the UN General Assembly proclaimed March 3, the day of the signature of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, as the UN World's Wildlife Day, March 3. Okay, then the last one is about global climate change. So global climate change refers to significant changes in our climate for a continuous period of time. So, ibig sabihin, for a continuous period of time, for a long period of time, ay nararanasan na po natin yung mga changes in our climatic conditions. So, what are these causes of climate change? May mga natural causes naman daw po. Tapos, syempre, ang pinakamalaking porsyento niyan ay gawa natin. So, natural causes may include volcanic activities, volcanic eruptions, since every time there is a volcanic eruption, especially if it is a massive volcanic eruption, it emits natural aerosols like carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide. Yung sulfur dioxide, once it reacts with water vapor, it will create sulfuric acid, which is not good. Diba? Volcanic ashes, dust, and others, which can cause the cooling effect to the lithosphere. So, the volcanic activities can cause cooling effect to the lithosphere because yung emitted aerosols na yan can block a certain amount or certain percentage of solar radiation. Tapos, another natural cause of climate change is orbital changes. Okay? So, natural naman po itong nangyayari and somehow it also affects our climate. So, orbital changes include eccentricity, obliquity, and precession. So, ayan yan. So, yung eccentricity class ay describing the shape of the Earth's orbit around the Sun. So, yung image po dito sa unahan, makikita natin dito yung orbit ng isang planet around the Sun o ng Earth. And it influences the seasonal differences when the Earth is closest to the Sun or when the Earth is farthest from the Sun. If you can still recall when we discussed about ano nga ba yun? Yung mga perihelion, aphelion, ito yun. Diba? Yung salitang perihelion, ibig sabihin nun, the Earth or any celestial body is moving close to the Sun. Tapos yung salitang aphelion, ibig sabihin nun is the Earth is far from the Sun. So, eccentricity, again, describes the shape's orbit around the Sun. So, if when the Earth is closest to the Sun, malamang, or the term is perihelion, so it gets more solar radiation, and if it is farthest from the Sun, less po yung solar radiation. So that will affect our season or seasonal difference. Tapos yung obliquity, yung picture naman sa kaliwa, that's about the tilt of the Earth's axis away from the orbital plane. So if the Earth is tilted towards or away from the Sun. Okay? So, ang normal po ata, if I'm not mistaken, is 23.5 ba yun? Check nyo na lang. So, if the Earth is tilted towards the Sun, natural, it will receive, more tilt means more severe season. And meaning warmer summer, colder winter. And if it is less tilted, meaning less severe season, cooler summer, milder winter. So, ganun yung nagiging effect po niya. So, whether the Earth is tilted towards or away from the Sun. What's the term ba? Ano nga ba yung tawag natin doon if the Earth is tilted towards the Sun? Naalala niyo ba? Nandiyan pa po ba kayo? Nakikinig pa ba? If the Earth is tilted towards the Sun, ang tawag natin doon is? Anyone? From 3-3, 3-2? Tapos anong tawag naman natin if the Earth is tilted away from the Sun? Tapos anong tawag natin when the Earth is not tilted towards or away from the Sun? Anyone? Ingay ng anak ko. Naririnig niyo ba yung sigaw? So, anyone po from 3-3 or 3-2 who knows the answer? Wala po. Remember the term?
Solstice po.
Yun, very good. Ano po yun?
Solstice.
Correct. Okay, so if the Earth is tilted towards the Sun, so tawag po natin doon is summer solstice. Tapos po pag away from the Sun, winter. And if it is not tilted towards or away from the Sun, the term is? What's the term? Kasi sa isang taon po, meron po dyan na the Earth is not tilted towards or away from the Sun. Okay? Ang tawag po natin dun sa event na yon ay That's the term. Pag summer solstice, di ba? Ito yung summer season, mahaba yung araw kaysa sa gabi. Winter solstice, mahaba yung gabi kaysa sa araw. December seasons na, December months, mga months na yan. Okay? Yung the earth is not tilted towards or away from the sun. Meaning that the length of daylight and darkness is almost same. What's the term?
Equinox, ma'am.
Equinox, very good. Tama po yun. Okay? Equinox. So, yung pangatlo is about precession, which is the change in the orientation of the Earth's rotational axis. So, gets nyo naman siguro dyan sa picture, no? So, precession is the change in the orientation of the Earth's rotational axis. So, precession affects the direction of the Earth's axis. So, which in turn will affect also the change in the dates of perihelion and aphelion, because the change in the axis location of the Earth will also affect the dates of perihelion and aphelion, and therefore it will also affect our seasons. So interrelated sila, di ba? So again, ito pong dinidiscuss natin ngayon. These are natural things or events na nangyayari po sa mundo, okay? And somehow again, it will affect kung yung climatic condition natin. Pero syempre yung tinatawag natin na global climate change ngayon, which is really affecting lahat po tayo, ay ang pinakamalaking rason po niyan ay nanggaling na sa gawa po natin. So, yung increased global warming and greenhouse effect, di ba? Greenhouse effect, alam naman natin yan, natural po yan, nangyayari po yan. Kung wala po tayong mga greenhouse gases, mabubuhay po kaya tayo dito sa mundo. Di ba? Di ba? Hindi. Because we really need those greenhouse gases. We really need that greenhouse effect na tinatawag. It's just that, sobra. So, sumusobra. So, excessive accumulation of these greenhouse gases, especially increase in the amount or percentage of carbon dioxide, fossil fuel, from fossil fuel use and industrial processes, 65%, it's all about carbon dioxide. So, ang taas po ng porsyento na yan. And, that resulted na into global climate change. And some human activities like, fossil fuel use. Tapos yung burning of fossil fuels, diba? Alam naman natin po yan na kaya nga po nililimitahan yung paggamit sana na tapos ina-advocate na gumamit ng mga renewable energy source kasi nga po those fossil fuels releases greenhouse gases and aerosols. So, those greenhouse gases, if it is excessive, and aerosols, if it is sobra rin, it would alter the incoming radiation and outgoing thermal radiation. So, greenhouse gases like yung mga carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, ano pa ba? Yung mga halocarbons, yung mga CFC, mga ganon, chlorofluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, yung mga ganon. So, it's not good, okay? Tapos yung pangalawa is deforestation. Siyempre, yung pagsusunog po ng at pag-convert nitong forest into other purposes that could also lead to global climate change. At least nababawasan kasi yung gagamit ng diba? Gagamit ng carbon. So, and then yung nasa kaliwang picture, po yan? Fertilizer use. Okay, the use, for instance, of nitrous oxide. So, ayan. So, all these activities and many more, may iba pa po, can lead to global climate change. Ayan. So, potential effects, di ko na iisa-isahin yan, pero nakikita naman po natin how human activities can result to damaging our climatic condition from increased melting of glaciers, sea level rise, loss of biodiversity that would lead to extinction, global warming, alteration, disturbance in our ecosystem, and many more. Responses to environmental awareness. Ayan, so, di ko na babasahin yan. So, dito po these are some international events that promotes environmental awareness. Nasa module niyo naman po yan. So you may read on the module. Actually, kinap and paste ko lang po ito from the module. So, naka-indicate po dyan every month kung ano yung mga events na yan, international events that will promote environmental awareness. So, sometimes we are aware naman talaga di ba? Alam naman natin itong mga to. It's just that, Earth Hour, World Water Day, ayan. World Wildlife Day, ayun yung sinabi ko po kanina. So, we're familiar naman, we're aware naman, it's just that talagang nasa tao na lang yun, di ba? Kung gagawin at susundin po natin itong mga ito. So, it's really up to us. Ayan, so marami po yan. Okay, tapos yung huli is yung Climate Change Act of 2009. It was still existing hanggang ngayon. It was created the Climate Change Commission under the Office of the President. The Commission is in charge of programs to cut down the carbon emission and at least lessen the impact of climate change. So it was approved to protect the right of the people to a balanced and healthy ecosystem. So this Philippine Climate Change Act of 2009 or Republic Act of 9729 serves as an action plan that lays out the strategies, initiatives, and activities to prepare the Philippines, to prepare our country to the inevitable effects of climate change. So, prepared ba tayo? So, I don't know. Ayun po. So, ayan. I think that's the last slide for this topic. Okay? So, again, ito pong PPT na to, this is all about some specific kasi yung last part po ng ng syllabus natin or course outline natin for STS, ang nakalagay po doon ay sa specific issues in STS. So, meron na po tungkol sa genetic modification, meron na tungkol sa environment natin like loss of biodiversity and global climate change. So, ang susunod po nating topic, under pa rin ng specific issues in STS is nanotechnology. So, what is this nanotech? What is this nanoscience? And yung last nga po is about global pandemic. So, lahat po yan under ng specific issues in STS. Okay? Question po, umabol, Acosta, ngayon lang ba ito pumasok? Wala, na ano lang. Okay, may question po ba tayo? Before we end our meeting for today, may question po ba? Question with regards to our discussion for today and question sa mga gagawin po natin, by next meeting? May mga question pa po ba o gustong i-clarify? No more? Alam na po ba ang gagawin?
May upcoming exam po ba?
Joshua, exam po, okay. Hindi po yung final sa quiz. Tama ba? Ang tinatanong mo?
Yes po.
Okay. So, no more. Okay? Wala na akong balak magbigay ng another activity. Wala na rin akong balak magbigay ng another written since may binigay akong report So wala na akong ibibigay pang another written activity. So ibig sabihin po, the total of written activities for students under online mode ay 4 lamang. Tapos po quiz, I will not give a quiz na. Okay? So by next meeting, tuwa-tuwa naman si dito. So, yung magiging final natin, assessment po natin or evaluation of whatever you've learned for the final term is your final exam. Okay? So, doon na lang. Total, nagbigay naman ako ng report for final term. So, since nung midterm, wala naman akong binigay na report sa inyo. So, kaya nagbigay ako ng quiz. For final term, since nagbigay naman ako ng report, so, para pang balance, no more quiz, diretso tayo ng final exam. Okay? Kaya po yung schedule natin by next Wednesday will be a quiz tuloy. Ayan, will be the discussion on nanotech. Tapos by 13, discussion on global pandemic. And then by, yung finals natin. 16, kaya na ba? Saturday yon. or 20, the next Wednesday? What do you think? O sige, pag-usapan na lang natin yung mga susunod na meeting. Magkikita pa naman tayo. May ilang meetings pa tayo. Okay, at ilang topic pa na i-discuss. So, yes po, Nicole.
Ano po, question po. Yung sa midterm po ng mga hindi mga correspondents po na hindi nakapag-take ng midterm, sa Google Classroom niyo rin po ba ito-post sa Wednesday?
Ang usapan natin, sino po ba itong, si President na kausap ko nito, di ba? Wednesday po ba? Next Wednesday?
Opo,
Yes,
Wednesday.
Oo. So, hindi na po sa classroom. Paano kaya? Kasama ba yung mga correspondents doon sa sa GC natin?
Opo.
Yes po.
O di ba may gumawa tayo ng GC separate? Ha? Kasi medyo madami kayo eh. Sa 3-3 po ba to? Parang ilan yun, di ba, Pres?
7 po ang correspondence.
7 students ba?
Opo, 7 po.
Na hindi nakapag-take.
Dalawa po yung nakapag-take, 5 po yung hindi.
Okay. So, meron ng 2 nakapag-take, tapos 5 yung hindi. So, yung 5 lang. Okay? So, paki-contact na lang po ako, ha? Okay? Kung sino man yung 5 yun. Okay? Paki-contact po ako, tapos, doon na lang sa DC natin na gagawin nyo, doon ko isi-send yung, yung separate na exam. Okay? Because I'll be making another set of questions para po doon sa mga hindi nakapag-take ng midterm. Okay? So, yeah, yun po. Nicole,
Okay, thank you.
online ka naman, Nicole? Or online, ka ba? Online or correspondence?
Correspondence po. Kaya po hindi po ako nag-take ng midterm kasi ang alam ko po is final exam lang po yung iti-take.
Okay. Sige po. Anyway, wala namang problema doon. So, I'll be making a separate questions na lang and exam para po sa inyo. Okay? So, ayun. Kontakin na lang po ako ha kung paano po para maalala ko at hindi ko makalimutan. Ha? Okay? So, ayun lang. Ano pa ba? No more question? Wala na po. O, alam na ha. By next meeting, yun po yung topic natin. Bahala na kayo. 3-3-3-2. Okay? Kung paano po magiging hatian nyo. Kung sino man po yung, kung sino man po yung group 1 natin for 3-2 at group, 1 natin for 3-3. Okay? Kayo na po bahala para sa pagde-divide ng subtopics natin. Pero, ang nakita ko kasi talaga doon, if you will use the module, ay from history, diba? Sino-sino yung mga tao. Yung mga yung mga, pwede na rin sa sa history, isama na. Yung mga, tawag doon? Yung, ano ba yan? Tamo? Yung mga microscope, iba't ibang klaseng microscope na ginamit, to view and to view yung mga nanomaterials. So, yung mga ganon. So, yeah. So, bahala na kayo kung paano yung magiging hatian. Tapos, nanofabrication, top-down, bottom-up, yun. Paano ba yung ginagawa? And then, ang pinakamahaba dun yung mga benefits yung mga nanomaterials, yung mga iba't ibang field sa communication, sa transport. Diba? Chinek nyo na ba yung module? Yun yung mahaba So, na parte. Group 1 for 3-3 and 3-2. So, kayo na po bahala ha. Basta, balance yung pagkakahati. Same with group 2 of 3-3 and 3-2 sa global pandemic. So, kahit kayo na rin po. Okay? Bahala maghati. Basta i-present niyo sa akin by Wednesday. Okay? So, kung wala ng question, picture taking na po tayo.